hold on. Like, you haven't thought critically about it. You heard from somebody else. Your mom and dad told you, and then some college professor told you, and then Matt and Scott told you on a podcast, and you believed us. Don't just believe people. Think critically about things. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to the Barbell Logic Podcast. I am Scott Hambrick, and with me, or maybe I'm with him, it's Matt Reynolds. And today we're going to talk about the culture that says, I heard blah, 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 blah. Thoughts?
Please advise. That's your favorite
Please
one,
advise.
Right? Please advise.
You know what? I don't get that. I don't get that one so much from the social media people. That's more in business,
Right.
But I heard blah, 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 blah. Thoughts?
Yeah, I was telling you, I've got, for whatever reason, we get a lot of these every week. But this week, for whatever reason, I got a lot more than normal. That all of the questions started with, I heard blank. And then they wanted my response on it. And I'm going to read one because I don't think it'll hurt the guy's feelings. I certainly won't say who it is. It's a client that I really like. I really, really like this guy. So I'm not shitting on him. It's just. So it was. I recently heard that having a wider stance for the deadlift allows more quad involvement. What's your opinion on this? Also, when I hurt my back, I was referred to the work of Dr. Stuart McGill. His studies suggest that 92% of the population can't pull a deadlift with a neutral spine. What would you say to this? Anyway. So, and that's one of literally probably 20 of these that I got last week. It was just like, I heard this. I heard that weight training makes women bulky. I heard that weight training stunts kids' growth. I heard that this will hurt your growth plates. I heard that this will, squatting's bad for the knees. Like, I heard mentality.
What bothers you about that? What do you think it is? Let's see if we can make this about you.
Okay.
What do you think it is about that formulation of the question?
Well, I hear stuff all the time,
you?
Right? Like, I hear stuff too, and I hear stuff that piques my interest. I heard X, and this thing, and I'm like, that's interesting. Now, what I do, here's the difference between me and what I'm experiencing on the other end, is that a person hears something, and so they then ask me the question so they can hear something twice, or hear. So then I give you an answer, and now they heard the original whatever theory is, and they've now heard my response to that theory without doing any critical thinking on their own whatsoever, without doing any rabbit hole, dive into the rabbit hole, which I do constantly. Every day there's some random topic that I sort of get interested in, and I go, man, and not once. I just don't ever reach out to people and be like, hey, what do you think about X? Right? Like, maybe after I've done all that research and I have a really good idea what I'm talking about, you and I will talk about something in economics or something, and we can but it's after I do my own critical thinking. And I think the important thing that I want to talk about on this podcast is that the point of this podcast from the very beginning was to take a systematic, logical look at strength training from a critical thinking standpoint. So much of the things that we've developed over the last couple of years have come from us critically thinking about these different topics like programming or nutrition or whatever they are. And so I've got some issue with the fact that going right from I heard this to thoughts ? Takes out the logic, the reason, and the critical thinking on behalf of the person that's asking the question. It's like they don't want to do the critical thinking. They just want to hear from so-and-so, and then they want to ask so-and-so else so they can also hear from them. And then it's like confirmation bias. I don't know, like if I say, yeah, that's right, they're like, okay, now I've heard it from two people. Must be true. Like, what? No, that's not what we do. I don't want anybody to listen to this podcast and listen to anything we say and just accept it as gospel truth. Like,
well, I do.
Run it through the ringer, man. But you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, that's like, we question things for a reason. And it makes us better. And that idea of critical thinking refines us as people. That's part of this voluntary hardship thing. It's not just about putting bar on our back and squatting it. It's critical thinking is hard. But I have the entirety of the world's knowledge on my cell phone in my pocket.
Yeah,
I mean, you know what I mean.
But both good and bad. I mean, that's part of the problem.
Oh yeah, both good and bad. Like I was talking to my pastor about this the other day. He was at a birthday party, and I was like, how weird is it 20 years ago if you had gone to somebody and said like, hey, the entirety of the world's knowledge is going to be on your cell phone in your pocket, and we're gonna basically use it to like look at pornography and watch cat videos on YouTube and play video games or whatever, and social media, and post pictures of our sushi.
Right.
Like, that's crazy, right? So for me, because I have this knowledge here available to me, like I use it quite a bit to go down the rabbit hole, but then I also sometimes just put it away and just sit in my chair, often enjoying a nice bourbon, and I think about something, and I think through it in my head. So like this guy, I heard that Stuart McGill says that 92% of the people in the world can't set their back in a neutral position to pull a deadlift. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, let's think about it, right?
Yeah, I think that the thing that bothers me about that sort of formulation of the inquiry is when they say, I heard, I know immediately that I'm not getting a quote from the other source.
Sure.
I'm getting something that they filtered, and it's probably going to be a straw man. You know, they're going to have misheard it, and they're going to misrepresent the other thing they saw. And then two, all that stuff feels like internet pot stirring. Like, you know, people love to set two people with audiences against each other on the internet.
Sure.
And
well, if the person asks a question from that perspective,
it seems very gossipy. It seems very gossipy.
Yeah, we've taken a completely different perspective here. I get those questions as well, and I won't respond to those questions. That's a delete email. If somebody is asking a question, I heard this, and it's here to stir the pot. Here's someone who doesn't like you, or here's someone that has a completely different viewpoint than you do, and I heard X, and the point is to sort of stir the pot. I'm not playing into their game. But I actually get a lot of questions from fans, from clients, from listeners of the podcast, et cetera, that say the same thing, but their goal is not to stir the pot or make me angry. It's to go, and sometimes they don't even know. Like, it's like this question about, well, I heard that doing sumo deadlifts will use more quads than a conventional deadlift. And I'm like, well, let's just talk through this like in a logical, critical thinking manner. Like, what do the quads do? The quads extend the knee. So the more the knee is bent at the start of the movement and the knees must be extended at the top of the movement, that version of the movement will use more quads, right?
Well, that's the answer they wanted to hear, perhaps.
Maybe, but the problem is that then I had to do the critical thinking for them. And so that's why my problem is actually less about internet pot stirring. And I see that. Like, I can pick up on that pretty quick and delete it. It's more about like, hey, guys, if you're listening to this podcast and you're a fan of this podcast, and what we value, you and I, more than almost anything else, is this idea of critical thinking. Like, think for yourself. Like, think about these things with logic and reason. And our friends, our fans, our clients, our listeners, our et cetera, they're not doing that. They're bypassing that entire step. Like, let's just see what Matt and Scott have to say about it. Like, that's, you know, I don't want to be judgmental. Like, you're robbing yourself of something.
Right.
To not have to think critically. There are people in my family, who I will not name, who do this. They just take my word for it. Everything. I'm like, don't take my word. Like,
yeah, have them call me.
What? Like, think about this. Like, they'll say stuff, and I'll be like, even my kiddos will say stuff sometimes. I'll be like, hold on, stop. Something they heard their friend say.
Right.
You know, like this. Maybe we can take this completely out of the business side. Like, I got two. I say little girls. I got one that's 9 and one that's 14, and they're like, I heard. Especially my 9-year-old right now. She says all the time. She's like, so-and-so, my friend says blank. Like, she's asking us the question. And we go, what do you think? She's like, I don't know. Well, think about it. What do you think? Like, does it make sense or not? You know? And so it's just, so that's what bothers me. It bothers me when we want to have a culture of learning here at Barbell Logic Online Coaching, among our staff, among our clients, among our listeners, among our content consumers. We want to have a culture of learning. That's what we're doing. That's what online great books is. It is a culture. That's the important part is not to get through all the books, right?
Right.
The important part is is to develop a culture of learning and the book, this great classic of Western literature, is the tool that is used to help teach you how to think critically. And when we bypass that, and not just bypass it, but and I think a lot of people bypass it in ignorance, but I think a lot of people bypass it because they actually don't care to learn how to think critically. And I have a problem with that. Like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to learn how, like, you kind of bust my balls all the time about theology and the stuff that I believe and stuff. But the point is, and we're actually going through a lot of that stuff right now, like we're teaching through the book of Romans. I don't want to get on a sidetrack here.
Here he goes.
There's a lot. No, I don't. But there's a lot of hard stuff in there, right? And it's going to cause a lot of angst in people. Good. It doesn't matter. Like, I actually don't even care what side you fall on in some of that theology, as long as you've actually thought about it. But if all you do is listen to a preacher tell you what it says and his interpretation of it, or read a commentary and say the commentary says it says this, well, there's no critical thinking there. Think about it. And that doesn't matter whether that's theology or philosophy or strength training or programming or all of these things. Well, I don't know. Why would a sumo deadlift use more quads? Can a sumo deadlift use more quads? Maybe it does because the knees are more bent, depending on the anthropometry. If the knees are more bent, they got to straighten out. Sure, there's more quads. The hip is more open, the knee's more closed. Sure, it uses more quads. But that's not, you can come to that conclusion on your own. You don't need me to tell you that. Or tell me what your theory is. I heard this, so I thought about it, and when I critically thought about it, this is kind of what my thought process is. Does that, okay, that's a different question.
That's a different question.
Because then somebody's come to me and they said, I've thought about this critically,
that's a
and
check
this is
my
where
math.
I'm landing on it. Do you land in the same place? Why or not?
Yeah.
Hey, perfectly acceptable question.
Check my math.
All right.
I like that. But, you are, I don't think you're wrong about that signaling. Maybe they hadn't gone through the trouble to do the critical thinking. I don't think you're wrong about that. But I really do think so many times when they say, hey, I heard specific person say.
Yeah.
I really feel like that. No, I don't feel like it. I think those people are really enjoying the fact that there could be two opposing camps thinking about one thing. I think they really enjoy that. I had lunch with a friend the other day, and he's like, why don't you have so-and-so on your podcast so you guys can argue? I'm like, I'm not going to fucking do that. I'm not going to invite somebody to my house so I can argue either. They can start their own show. Right.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in debate.
In debate ends up being something very, very different than getting to the truth so many times. Like, there are all these, like this rhetoric and these appeals to emotion and all this stuff gets used.
Sure.
And then very few people who witness the debate or hear the debate have their mind changed. Almost nobody does.
Sure.
And the people that are debating almost never change their mind. And there's just a bunch of furor and dust gets raised up. And then when it's all over, my heart rate's up and everybody had a great time but me and nothing happened. I'm just not interested in it.
Yeah. Our idea of debate versus like the Socratic method, which is what you're the positive end of that, like if it's done correctly, it looks like it's a Socratic discussion. It's that everybody comes together without trying to win an argument, but rather the goal is to find out the truth as a group.
Right.
And so debate is constantly there to help lead us to the truth, and not to win the argument.
And we would call that dialectic, which is different than really debate. And like when you debate, you can use rhetoric, and it's about winning. It's a heuristic, they call it, ERISTIC, where you're just trying to you're just trying to win. You're trying to pin your opponent. That's it. And that's what most stuff ends up being anywhere. And dialectic is very different, where you just try to get to the answer, a good answer, a better answer than you had.
Yeah, and I enjoy those discussions. I mean, those are my favorite discussions, but they're few and far between. They don't happen very often.
I think you and I do that. I think
more than I do it with you more than anybody else.
And nobody gets mad.
And I have my brother in business, and we never get mad.
Nobody cares.
Sometimes we disagree, and we'll and here's why, and then the other guy listens to the other one, and that's the way it should look. But this is exactly why people who, if you make a political post on your Facebook page, you should be banned from like I would just like and I don't mean banned by Facebook or banned by the government. I mean like the community should take your phone away and stomp on it. Because if you make a political post on Facebook, there are only two potential outcomes from that. One, the people who agree with you applaud you, and the people who don't agree with you hate you, and you've changed nobody's mind.
Right.
It's an exercise in social media masturbation. It's a complete and utter waste without the climax at the end, by the way. Just masturbating without the payoff.
No pay.
How worthless is that? And so it's the same thing here. Like if you really want to learn the answer to something and you hear something that sort of sparks your interest or like, oh, I didn't think it worked that way, take some time, think about it critically, do some background reference checks, read like, all of these things. And then if you've got people that you respect, then go to them. But don't just be like, hey, I heard X and I think you're going to disagree with that. What do you think? Thoughts? ?
Here's another one I hate. The sentence fragment. 8s for squats? ?
Oh, man.
Like, I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
8s for squats? 6-day split? ?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I get a lot of those. I get a lot of those on Instagram Lives, in particular. And you know, the good thing about Instagram Live is I can say, man, that's a sentence fragment. I don't know what you mean. You're going to have to give me some more.
Right.
You're going to have to ask a better question here.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to, I understand, like probably that's coming from a place of, hey, they're trying to keep the questions short. Long questions on Instagram Live take too long to read. So the long questions are just as bad as the sentence fragments because you're like, man, I can't read a paragraph. Like, tighten this up, but help communicate this better.
I think a lot of the time that sentence fragment is they're just trying to lob you a softball to do jazz with, you know?
Maybe,
but,
yeah.
But I don't know what to do with that. I want to actually answer the question to the best of my ability, but I have to know what the question is. So they've got to give me that to the best of their ability too. That one's tough, man.
It is tough. It is tough. So critical thinking.
I just wrote a little bitty, like a 700-word thing about Plato's Republic, justice, and artificial intelligence on my Online Great Books blog.
Yeah.
Plato's Republic, they're like, what is justice? That's how it all starts. And they, you know, Plato writes this giant book about it, and people have been wrestling this thing for thousands of years. You know, is it the rule of the strong? Is it the rule of the masses? Is it, you know, what you can get away with? You know, the Ring of Gyges things. What is it? And nobody even knows yet. And we don't know. And so I think that all interpersonal relationships are governed by notions of justice. Yes. I made an argument in there about, like, if you're gonna split a candy bar with somebody, how do you do that justly? Well, I cut it in half. Well, maybe the other person's not hungry and they only need it a little bit. Maybe they're allergic to chocolate, and giving them half of it is a death sentence. Like, you really don't know, and it certainly doesn't take into account who paid for the damn thing. You know, so we don't even know how to cut a candy bar in two, like, really, to everyone's satisfaction. And then we're going to, you know, fire up some machine, and it's going to drive my self-driving car and make decisions about who lives and dies. Man, we got no business screwing with that shit.
Yeah. By the way, Scott and I disagree on this. Just FYI. So we've talked through this. We've had debate on this. I think we've had mostly Socratic discussion, but again, you and I, we both thought critically a lot about this. I don't think true artificial intelligence, like, man, that's not, we are not just decades away, but probably centuries away from actually getting true artificial intelligence. But the algorithm has changed everything, right? Like, we know that, starting like that idea of machined learning from, okay, I can learn this, I can machines can now A/B test and figure out which one's better, and then do that more, and then A/B test more. So what? But I understand.
But what's better? That's the problem.
I get it. So the question is that I would look at something like a self-driving Tesla, and I would argue from the opposite end of the spectrum and say, look, the vast majority of deaths that occur on the road come from human error, not from a moral choice. And you would agree with that.
Yep.
But you want to make that choice if the moral choice must be made. You want to be the one making the choice. And so that if the mom pushing the carriage with the little baby in the carriage, right, across the street steps in front of your Tesla, your argument is, I don't want to say Tesla because I don't want Elon Musk to be mad at me, but any self-driving car, then that self-driving car must make a choice
to protect me,
a moral choice, a just choice. And your argument, I think I hear what you're saying is that is, we can't even do that at a human level well, and so artificial intelligence can never do that. Therefore, there's a real good chance that self-driving car is going to run you into the train overpass and save the mama and the baby, and you're like, I want to make that choice, and I get it.
And not only do I want to make the choice, but let's say the choice is wrong and the machine does it. Where's the appeal?
Sure.
Where's the consequence?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, we've got no business.
But my trade-off
with any
is,
of it.
Well, you're right, except for my trade-off.
Well, it's
from
that
a moral
utilitarian
standpoint,
thing.
you're right. From a moral standpoint, you're right. But if you go, well, look, I have no idea what the stats are. Let's say United States, 10,000 people die per year based on human error car accidents. Fine. Let's say it's 10,000, right? And you go to self-driving cars, and it goes from 10,000 to 27 a year. That's a trade-off I'm making. If it went from 10,000 to 5,000, I'd make it tomorrow.
Right.
And you go, and then every once in a great while, once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, a car is going to have to make a moral choice to kill someone. And it's going to have to choose which one to kill. And you have a foundational moral problem with that. And I totally understand why.
Yeah, and it's not.
But I just think for the greater good, like if it's going to save 5,000 lives or 10,000 lives or 12,000 lives, like.
Yeah, and it's important here to not get too hung up on the specific car deal because it's really about any algorithm. You know, somebody somewhere is making the decision about what's good and then programming the computer to act on that. Right. And, you're talking about A/B testing, and it figures out which one is best, and then it executes on that. Well, what's best? And so
best is what's based on the worldview of the coder that wrote it, right? And we see this already. You see this with Twitter and Facebook and YouTube.
It's either one, their worldview, which who the fuck knows what that is, or two, strictly a commercial interest.
Sure.
Strictly maximizing profit.
Both are clearly there, right? So
what you do.
You see this. You see people get flagged or people get banned, and you start to look at there is some pattern recognition that can be made by almost anyone to see, like, wait a minute, this group of people are getting their ideas and thoughts and things that they share are getting banned, and the other side isn't. And at some point, you're going to have that with everything.
Somebody decided that was best. That was in fact justice.
Best. Oh, I get the problem. I fully understand. I think the real issue is that we have to deal with this, right? Is that you go, okay, here's the trade-off. The trade-off is we can prove by metrics that this can save, the cars making the choices can save 95% of the lives of the deaths that occur on the roads. I'll stick with the car for a second. So you can save 95%, but that's going to require the car, the programmer, the company, is they get to choose morally what's right and what's wrong
for my family when I'm in that car.
For your family, right? And you're like, nope, I'm out.
So whose property?
And my 14-year-old who I'm teaching how to drive right now, I would take that chance because I trust the car manufacturer. Maybe this is really what the crux of the argument. I trust the car manufacturer more than I trust my 14-year-old behind the wheel.
Yeah, and I don't.
Yeah, that's fair.
That car manufacturer didn't give a shit about her.
No, but she doesn't give a shit about her either when she's fiddling the radio or texting a friend when she's right, even though it's against the rules to text and drive.
I came to play. I accept some risks, that are associated with being people and having kids,
Sure.
I don't buy that utilitarian.
But by the way, there's no. What's the difference in that versus every time you fly commercial? Like you put your life in the hands of the pilot and the airline.
The difference is that Elon Musk isn't in the car with me. The pilot is. Right. My interests are closely aligned with the man behind the yoke there.
Right.
But I put this blog post out, and I got some of these emails. They're like, such and such writes this about this issue. What do you think? I don't fucking care what they did. I wrote my piece. You can read mine. It's not very long. You can read the other guys if you want, and then you can write yours if you want.
Sure.
But I'm not going to go read the other guys because you sent me an email about it.
Sure.
I mean, it's not that I'm.
Well, the point
it's
is
not that I'm
because
close-minded. I just don't have the time to read everything. Everybody's like, "Oh,
well,
this
the
guy
fact that you
disagrees.
wrote
Go
it
read
means
it."
you have thought critically about it.
Yeah.
This is the point. The point of this podcast is that in order to develop an opinion on something, you should have thought critically about it.
Yeah.
You should take some time to think critically about those things. And there's some really big issues. Those big issues like justice, like religion, like politics, like economics. We're not going to discuss the details of it all, but I don't really even care if you land on the opposite side of me or a different side of me, as long as I know that you're not ignorant about it.
You better have your reasons.
What's crazy is how often people are super ignorant and yet super opinionated. I know nothing of the subject, and yet I'm very opinionated on the subject. Hold on. You haven't thought critically about it. You heard from somebody else. Your mom and dad told you, and then some college professor told you, and then Matt and Scott told you on a podcast, and you believed us. Don't just believe people. Think critically about things.
Oh my God, that article I wrote.
Yeah.
The point of that article is nobody knows what justice is.
Right.
And then they send me a link and says, "Well, this guy says." God, man, come on. I don't even
Where
care.
he defines justice.
I don't care what he says.
Right.
And it's not that I'm close-minded. I just firmly believe that nobody knows to everyone's satisfaction what justice is.
Sure.
We don't.
Yeah. Now, I think that my wrap up on this, and then I'll hand it over to you to finish the show, is that I know that the vast majority of the world chooses not to think critically about things. But I think my perception has been over the last year or so that the vast majority of our listeners, of our clients, of our staff, of our people who are close to us do think critically about things. And I'm still surprised at the number of questions I'm getting. And I'm not telling you that to not send me questions. We like questions. I want questions. We want them we do a whole episode every Saturday about the questions. But I want to know that you've put some thought into it and that you're not just being lazy and you don't want to think critically about it and you want to just live vicariously through Scott and I's critical thinking. You're not made better by that, to just ask a question and get an answer and then go, well, now I heard Matt and Scott say it, so it either is true or isn't true or whatever. You're missing the whole point. The point is to think critically about the thing. And then if you've thought critically about the thing and can say, hey, I've thought about this a bunch, and I'm still working it out in my head. What do you think about this? Or this is where I fall. This is what I think now that I've thought critically about it. Does that make sense to you guys? Would you also land there? Those are great questions.
Yeah,
those are some of the best questions.
The check my math kind of thing is
check my
much
math
better.
Is great.
And by the way, I'm more likely to learn something from that too.
Me too.
Yeah.
We get that all the time. This is why I think you and I make each other better in the programming world, and why guys like Andrew and Bill and Nikki Sims, why they make me better at the business, because they're constantly questioning the way we do things and why. They think about it. Why don't we do it this way? I've thought about this. Why don't we run meetings this way? Wouldn't that be more efficient? Things like that. Interesting. You know what? Yeah, maybe that's right.
You guys can
maybe
figure
I should rethink that too.
You guys can figure this stuff out. Think about it. Work it through. If you hit a dead end, think about why you're at a dead end. Ask the question about the thing that got you to the dead end. What about the quad involvement in the sumo? Thoughts? Okay, think it through, and then when you finally can't get to the answer, try to figure out why you can't get to the answer. You might find that you have an incomplete knowledge of the anatomy.
Yeah.
Maybe. And then ask that question.
Yeah.
Then ask that question.
Yeah. What do the quads do? Help me understand. Whatever.
Yeah, what do the quads do? I've been trying to analyze the difference in the sumo and in the conventional deadlift, and I think that the main difference lies in quad involvement. I think they do this. What do you think?
Right.
Am I right or wrong? Help me out. Well, there's another show. Can I read a couple of 3-star reviews?
Sure.
iTunes.
Middle of the roads.
3-star reviews. The strength training content is good, but too often they get into rural lifestyle choices with unwanted topics of religion, homeschooling, relationships, and general conservatism. There are good episodes I cannot recommend for this reason alone, which is unfortunate. Hey, listen. Go listen to a different show. There are other shows. Maybe those are for you.
By the way, we try to be pretty careful in general here about, I'm really careful not to push religious or political views on people. Like I don't push religious or political views on people. But look, here's the
Rural
deal.
lifestyle choices.
Well, yeah, and listen. Actually, you know what? This is a real important point. What podcast number do you think this is?
Oh, this will be like
When we're recording?
220, 215.
Hey guys, you go record 220 hours of podcast. And you see if after 220 hours of podcast, you can create one, an interesting, entertaining show. And
It's nothing about
after
you.
After 220 hours, the listeners have no idea where you land on any of the issues.
Right.
Hey, that's impossible. Guys, we can't do that. So I'm real careful not to shove my shit down your throat. I mean, I really am, right? Like, hey, I don't proselytize people on religion.
Yeah, and you guys
Period.
have no idea how careful I am, by the way.
No idea. When I'm like, I make jokes about unbridled handbrake, and people are like, that's not unbridled. Like, this is handbrake at a 2 out of 10, and handbrake lives his life at a 9.5 out of 10. Like, it's all bridled. He's got a muzzle on, and he's just trying to mouth some words.
And
Like,
guys,
listen,
thanks for listening. Really, thanks for listening. But we just
yeah.
can't be all things for all people. If we tread on your sensibilities every now and then, you got a decision to make. I'd
by
love
the way,
to
I
keep
think
you.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, if you disagree with us, that's awesome. Disagree with us. You don't have to have rural Midwestern lifestyle mentality and listen to this podcast.
I live in a town of 1 million people, by the way.
That's right. That's right. I live in the Midwest.
There's
Like, that's right.
750,000 people within 8 miles of my house.
Yeah, same thing. We're 500,000 within 15 minutes of my house right now. So it's not exactly rural. We don't live on farms, right? So you know what? You know what my goal is? My goal is to get on this podcast and to be authentic.
I'm trying to have
real,
fun.
Have fun. Put all this stuff in our heads out there, in the atmosphere to just so that it's there. Like, all these things are important to me, but like in general, like, man, think of the world we live in, guys.
And dude, he says, Scott is not great. I'm not for everybody. And by the way, episode 527 on Art of Manliness is with Father Richard Rohr. Brett had Richard Rohr on his show, and he talks about male spirituality. And a lot of that show is about the two halves of life. Have you listened to that one yet, Matt?
I haven't. I saw
it's
it.
so good
because I couldn't download it while I was camping.
I've been reading Rohr for years, and I was kind of surprised to see him on there. But in the first half of life, men struggle to just establish themselves. Rohr calls it build the container.
Yeah.
And then something normally has to push them into the second half of life. It doesn't just happen. They have to endure some sort of heartbreak.
Yep.
And it's during the second half of life that they fill the container. Some other people, I think Dr. Pewter calls it the generative phase. That's where they like give back when they become the mentor.
Yep.
Whatever, the second half of life.
Yep.
And my whole argument about Buffett in particular is he never moved to the second half of life. He continues to hammer the business world. Hammer. I mean, he has to some degree that sort of Will Rogers folksy thing that he does, where he seems like, everybody's investor grandpa or whatever.
Sure.
He's moved into it somewhat.
You think that Munger's the other way around, though? Like, Munger's kind of,
Probably.
He's more of the Benjamin Franklin type. He's more of he's become the mentor sage of that world, and he's offered more there than Buffett does. I think Buffett still really likes to just get up and like check out the markets every morning and read about the markets. And I think that Munger still does the same thing, but I think that also he's sort of is that wit and wisdom of Charlie Munger, right? So he's
probably.
He's
and by the way,
I
I don't know either of these men. All I know is this sort of popular notion of what they're like and who they are. And that's what I'm reacting to. The truth may be very, very different. But that's the problem with that. And so, Sir, that gave that episode, a critical review, you're missing the point, Bubba. It's not about how much money they made.
Right.
It's not.
It's about the fact that they don't give back.
It's not even that they haven't given back. It's about they haven't moved out of that stage. What giving back looks like is very strange. It could be very, very
it's
different.
Totally different. That's sure. Yeah. The question is, how much does philanthropy mean if you're Andrew Carnegie or Rockefeller? Like, you give away all the money you've got. I mean, you can't. Like, you have
Carnegie
so much money. Like, it's not.
Was in the poorhouse.
Right. But right.
Some of them do, but it's not even about philanthropy.
Right.
teaching your grandkid to whittle. Like
That's right. I was going to say,
right,
it's
not just about working in the soup kitchen. I think there's much, much more important work to be done than, traditional philanthropy, just helping younger people in general. But anyway, there's another Barbell Logic podcast. Send your review to iTunes. You can go there. We're called Barbell Logic. You can probably find it. You probably already have. You'll leave us a review there. You can also do it on Stitcher and Google Play. We've been struggling with Google Play.
Have we?
Yeah, they've only got like 10 of our episodes up instead of all, however many. And we're having a real hard time getting that fixed, but we're working on it. We've had several people email about that. So we're trying to get that all fixed. Also, send your questions to questions@barbell-logic.com. And never forget to go to barbell-logic.com and look for the new blog posts and so on, and join up for the newsletter, the Friday Fives. I don't know what day this podcast will be out on, but you can be sure that we'll be putting another one out in just a few days. Talk to you soon. Bump, 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 bump.